Hello, my name is Mame Mensa Bonsu. I teach constitutional law at Lancaster University, Ghana. I'd like first to comment on Ms. Aboti's reflections, and then I'll have a number of questions for Dr. Mensa Bonsu.
Okay, so you do two questions.
Yes. No, I can put them all together, don't worry about it. So I do agree that we do have some problems that stem from attitude, but I don't think that it's just that. I must say that I think sometimes the law is the problem. Sometimes the law is not crafted in a way that makes it worthwhile to conduct yourself in a certain manner, and therefore there's no point to doing it. Now, we can talk about attitudinal change all we like, but attitudinal change, to be honest, is engendered by institutional checks. The reason why you go home at certain times is because you know that you're, as a young person anyway, that your parents will lock their door. The reason why you don't call your wife and say, hey, I've decided I'm not coming home, is because you know she will not countenance it. It's not necessarily just because you have the attitude of going home. Sometimes you have to set up structures. So if we want people to turn up to work at certain times, we should make it more worthwhile to turn up than it is not to. Now, in my very first paper, it was a student paper, I wrote about the clause on disclosure of interest in all of our public boards. I went through quite a number of those legislations, and I found that there's a clause that says that if anybody acquires an interest in conflict of their disclosure responsibilities, they will lose their seat on the board. But it doesn't say what happens to the contract. So if I keep quiet about my interest in a contract and I'm sitting on the Cocoa Board Council and I get a $100 million contract and you sack me from the council, what do I get? I've got my $100 million contract. Okay. So sometimes attitudes are shaped by the law and the structure of the law. Okay. So my question for Dr. Mensa Bonsu, though, first of all, I want to know, I don't think I was consulted in this general consultation business because I'm not a student. I notice quite a lot of students are consulted, although I have my worries about their ability to appreciate our long-term goals at 16. And I'm not a member of a public institution, and I'm not really an active member of a professional body. So does that mean that people like me will fall through the cracks in your consultations? And what happens to the plan when we've constitutionally entrenched it, and 40 years on, we've achieved all of the plans, and it's still in our constitution? Justice Databa has said that all provisions of the constitution are justiciable. So 40 years on, we have this plan we have no need for anymore, and it's in our constitution. And one might say, oh, we'll just amend the constitution, but we've been trying for 6 years. We haven't been able to do anything yet.
Thank you very much. I saw another hand at the extreme. Okay, let's bring it right. So, Doc, you get ready. 2 questions for you. People who were not consulted. And she's described various categories of persons which she fits in and yet didn't get consulted. Yes, please, your name and your question.
My name is Wisdom. I want to find out from Dr. Bonsu. Now, we have an institution, talk of the IMF and the World Bank, which inadvertently is managing the affairs of developing nations. And so if we're going to have a development plan, how sure are we that those conditions that these people will bring in, you can hold on to your policies and carry them out?
So what do you say your name is?
Wisdom.
Thank you. Doc, please let us have the 2 questions exhausted and then we'll come back to you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. On the attitudinal change, I think much has been said about it, so I need not go back. But I still believe that enforcement is critical. I once visited Sao Paulo, and you know, they have a dedicated bus lane, and we visited the company responsible for managing the system. I asked why people are not driving on that lane. He said, well, there are cameras everywhere, so they will be found out, so people will not dare. Now here, if you are to have a dedicated bus lane, how many people will respect that, especially when they know that no one will find them? So attitudinal change much depends on our ability to enforce laws and regulations. Now, so how wide the consultations? Now, we are proceeding in stages. the first stage was the regional consultations, or even before the regional consultations, that is where we met with key stakeholders, past presidents and others. Now, we finished with the regional consultations. The next stage has been the consultations with state actors, the MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies. The next stage is consultation with identifiable groups or non-state actors. We are fixing a date where we are going to invite comments. First of all, we are going to write to key... She
doesn't belong to any...
I'll come to that. Okay, there is...
How do you reach out? The question is not to herself.
All right.
How do you reach out to those who do not belong to these kind of groupings?
Right. First, we have advertised call for memorandum. And if you go to our website, we have a template where you can submit your input. Aside from that, we have a WhatsApp number. I think I showed it. Maybe you can show it again. We have a WhatsApp number where you can contribute. And I said, so far, you received close to 4,000 submissions from Ghanaians living in Ghana and abroad, sharing their opinion. We have also got a dedicated, 2 dedicated email addresses where you can give us submissions. In addition, we are going to hold a national youth forum where the youth will be invited. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. There's another critical question she asked, though, but it's more law-laden about when you put it in a constitution, for example, and entrench it. It is time-bound. After the 40 years, if everything else has been accomplished, what do you do to that provision? Ms. Abochi, you may want to answer for her, because... Okay.
Well, putting it in the Constitution and making it time-bound, I am not sure if it undermines its efficacy after the period. I mean, it still goes on. Development plan, I'm not an expert in that area, so I can't speak much to that, but I think it's an evolving thing. It's just like strategic plan. You don't achieve it within the time period. You know, you simply readjust it, correct? You simply readjust it moving forward. But I was more interested in commenting on Mr. Bunsu's comment as far as the question of the attitudinal change. Let us not make a mistake in the room here. It is not one or the other. The problems are complicated, and so the solutions are also multifaceted. So attitudinal change is definitely one of them. The institutional things you recommended are true, but look around, they are all there. So that's the thing. You know, we are not lacking in institutions and laws. We are lacking in the enforcement, which itself is attitudinal.
We have a couple of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Samson. Kwame Asase, I'm with the ECOWAS Vision 2020 project. Almost in tune with what the doc has been talking about. ECOWAS of state to ECOWAS of people, and we're looking at attitudinal change. I mean, that's the same thing that we're talking about. Now, for doc, we've come a long way. Our development plans predates independence. If we talk about even the whole world, we talk about the communal system, we talk about when the capitalist system came in, the middle of it, the midst of it, blah, 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 from SDG to now. What is so different from ours? Also, during your presentation, you made mention that it is not going to tie the hands of substantive government, but it is going to be binding. What is that about? You know, and to, for my friend Bright Simmons, thank you so much. I mean, I think we have a problem in this country. I was with the University of London, External System, LLB, and I realized we had a lot of people coming to the class, all politicians. It's become like law is now the conduit to become a politician. And I realized one thing, that we seem to have too many lawyers within politics. Seriously, and I think that is our bane. Interestingly, you know what? If you listen to Bright Simmons, and you sometimes listen to Honorable Osei Chairman Sabonsu, who is a planner, and you are a computer scientist, you will see that they propound solutions. You understand? It's not all about argument. Lawyers always argue about one thing or the other. We should change that and get more lawyers, engineers, planners into parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Kofi Ajimai. I'm from the Polytechnics. And our fraternity, we deal with spanners and screwdrivers and pipe wrenches. we talk about practical development. In fact, I would want to, in this my small comment, I want to thank the Noble Law Group because they are looking at the development of Ghana in a multi-dimensional perspective. In fact, we are talking about law that work, we are talking about development, we are talking about research. What I would want to see from the perspective of the National Development Commission is, to what extent have we looked at the vision for Ghana's development? To what extent do we see a national interest or public interest woven within the vision that will actually give us the focus for that development plan? What exactly is that development plan attempting to achieve? Because from my perspective, where I work, we train people, in fact, skilled people in technical and applied sciences, and they don't even have work to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
And the last aspect of it is that development plan, if it is going to engender what we may call an independent national economy, in which we cycle our resources to produce things within Ghana and make use of them, then that is it. But if we are going to concentrate on this issue of always exporting our raw materials and other things, it will not work.
Thank you very much. Now, please, I'm going to come back to you for only two more questions, and we are done. But those two questions must not be on the NDPC. Thank you very much. He's going to attempt to answer your two questions. You actually gave a commentary, not much of a question though, a bit of it in there. Please answer the questions that we have for you. Do we have one of the microphones here?
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, IMF conditionalities. You know, Ghana has signed onto the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness, and then the implementation of the Accra Agenda for Action. Now, all these require that the national systems form the basis for our engagement with development partners. Now, with the IMF conditionality of the IMF, I think it's a temporary intervention to solve an economic issue. So that is in a class of its own. Maybe Honorable can explain that further. Now, with ECOWAS Vision 2020, yeah, you know, even in addition to that, I showed that the AU is also implementing a 50-year agenda, and the first implementation plan is called Agenda 2023, setting targets that we need to achieve as members of the AU. Now, regarding binding and then tying the hands of government, what we mean is that we will agree on the targets, just like the targets that we have for AU. AU has set targets for us, but within that framework, we are free to determine how we can achieve those targets. So that's what we mean by the fact that it will not tie their hands, and yet it will be binding. The binding will be the target set, but the finance, the detailed implementation, the government will have the freedom to determine the best option to achieve the targets. Thank you.
The last two questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Sabute from the Polytechnic Teachers Association of Ghana. I have a question for Mr. Abochi. In interpreting constitutional law, should the judge look at the effect of the interpretation? If so, is it not going to amount to he then bringing in policy instead of mere interpretation? Thank you.
That's what he said plenty about.
The last question, and then we take the answer.
Hello, my name is Kofi Sami. I'm from the Ghana School of Law. My question goes to Bright. I think Bright took me back to my level 200 international politics class. And I think that you tried to make, explain what public interest and national interest is. But I think that I didn't get a gist of how the elite middle class in our society influence the debate between public interest and national interest. Because most of the time you find out that there's a disconnect between the average middle class and the lower class and the upper class. So that the average middle class Ghanaian feels that he wants to live in a gated community tries to buy his own water, contributes to fix his own road. At the end of the day, when he gets an emergency, he dies on the Spintex Road in the traffic because he felt detached from the system of solving the basic problem of the health care system. I want to know your take on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand that we can take 2 more questions, but that will be after Ms. Abochi and Bright have answered the questions you have posed.
Okay. So the question is, should a judge consider the effect of decisions? The difficulty of answering a question like this is because the context between should and or ought and is always lurking in the background. What is actually done versus what ought to be done. Properly speaking, a judge should not consider what anyone thinks. Let me tell you the classic scenario of why judges should not do that. The reason Jesus Christ was crucified by many people was because Pontius Pilate considered the effect of his decision. Without speaking too much biblically, that is actually the context. Because Pontius Pilate, as a Roman judge at the time, was considering what the people were thinking. So after finding him not guilty, he just asked them, what do you think? And they said, do this. He considered what the people would do. They might revolt. To avoid a revolt, he pandered to them. So ordinarily, judges are trained as judges to administer justice, and therefore, before you can properly administer justice, you are sometimes advised not to listen to what third parties are doing. And that's why in countries with jury trials, juries are sometimes quarantined. So they don't even have to listen to the media because they don't want to be affected. The essence is that you have to administer true justice without being consequentialist. Being consequentialist is to think of the consequences. Once you start thinking of the consequences, you might compromise on true justice and be more affected by what others may think of the judgment. But the reality of that, one second, just to tweak it. But the reality of that is that constitutional interpretation is always a different ballgame. You are dealing with national stability. You are dealing with national cohesion. You are dealing with public, public expectations. You are dealing with the governance. You are dealing with the very future of the country. Judges, therefore, are not insular. And as Cardozo said, reality is the judge himself is a sum total of everything happening around him, including his upbringing and including what you and I are both expecting and are afraid of. And so the reality is that they do consider consequences. But in an ideal world, they may not, but they do.
So I have my, listening to the questions, quite clearly the interest is certainly the NDPC, which is interesting. But fascinating enough, none of the other speakers have touched on the presentation of the NDPC at all. I thought I should make a very quick comment on the NDPC long-term plan. I have looked carefully at what Dr. Sebunsu had presented, and I acknowledge that when it comes to procedure, they've made every effort they can to be inclusive. I'm not sure how that saves them from the question of content, because determining how this country should evolve over the next, 50 years, it's not something that you do lightly. The pace at which technology is changing alone means that some of the people who have insights into what this country can do will never have a seat around the table. I know a lot of people that are in technology, there are a lot of people that are doing artificial intelligence and the rest of it. In this country, young people, 20s, etc., they will not have the influence over the plan that the national elites will have. And yes, so the future is technology. So we have to be very careful about content. Maybe they should limit themselves to procedure. The question that I was asked directly, which is the question around middle classes. I mean, you are right that, we've had a very detailed 3-hour or so conversation, and none of us have touched on the most seminal moments of our country's history over the last decade, which is the sudden emergence of action groups, pressure groups, that are driven largely by middle-class sentiment. Citizen Ghana movement is right here, represented by Mr. Bentel, Occupy Ghana, and derivatives of those forms, Dumsa Must Stop and the rest of it. The way I see it is very simple. In every revolution we've seen in the world, the middle class have led. It's never been true that the masses have ever arisen. You cannot point to a single revolution anywhere in the world where the masses on their own accord had just got up and then revolted. The problem with middle-class revolutions, as often is that it's always inherently contradictory and inherently hypocritical. So you rightly pointed out that they want to live in their gated estates, they don't want to go into politics, and yes, they want to continue to challenge. I think the fundamental direction that will happen is that some middle class will begin to move into politics, and then you have your answer. I don't have enough time, so I can't go into the details of it. But I think the middle class moving into politics is the next frontier of this revolution that you're about to see.
Thank you very much. Our last two questions, and please be straight to the point.
Okay, I think mine have to do with contribution. My name is Alfred Nati Agbo from the Progressive People's Party, and I'm also a project consultant as well. Talking about performance standard by Bryce Simmons, as a political party, we are actually advocating for the creation of a public service ministry. That will be more like, they will be there as checks and balances to public institutions. So we think moving forward as a country, maybe there's a need for us to consider that. So this is what I have for you.
Thank you. The last one was at the back, or you've changed your mind? Yeah, okay.
My name is Warwi Brown. I'm a teacher.
Sorry, the name?
Warwi Brown, David Warwi Brown. I'm a teacher. Mine is a comment. I've realized that we need to change our attitudes. Attitude is everything. And what I think is going wrong is that we are copying everything from the West, leaving our cultural values. And I believe that our systems, our structures are not matured enough to contain some of these values we are trying to import from the West. And it's rather giving us negative, let's say, consequences rather than positivism. For example, yes, I agree that corporal punishment, maybe student caning has been abolished and to some extent might not be good. But when we were in school, because we are disciplined, you know very well that there are some things, if you do them, you are going to be disciplined in a certain way. You would never do them. But we say, okay, we go to the West, everything, human rights, this rights of everything. We import everything to the extent that even a child these days, when a parent tells the child not to do A, the child goes to do A and adds B to it. And when you say it, human right. And I believe that this is what is eating deep into our society. I teach my students and I tell them, listen, some of your parents might be engaged in certain activities. And you realize that by the time the parents leave office, they try to what? Get opportunities for their children to get there. And some of these parents might be engaged in certain things which are not helping this nation. And the children will learn it because they will learn it from their parents.
Right.
So I think that we need to change our attitudes and stop copying those bad attitudes from the West and focus on how our culture can help us develop as a nation. And I believe we can get there.
Thank you very much. Now, we come up here to wrap up in some 30 seconds each. The final comments, and I'd like Prof. more particularly, if you can take about a minute to tell us what is the way forward, laws that work. But I saw that Mr. Bentel had his hand showing that he wanted to comment for a while, so I can't help it. Let's hear him say something briefly, and maybe the minority leader can also give us a comment, as you have heard everything.
I've been listening, and it's quite interesting. I think more of this will be useful. And I've been hoping that some issues will come up, but I just want to throw them in. So putting everything together, indeed, I think we've made 3 assumptions in this country, and if we focus on them, and maybe when you wrap up, you can help us with that. The first assumption is the supreme competence and incorruptibility of our leaders. It's an assumption we've made we should reconsider. And our leaders also assume that. In fact, we have a phrase in this country, we say, in the wisdom of the president. All right? And I've had opportunity to say that a person's stock of wisdom does not increase by getting elected. So that first assumption of the supreme competence and incorruptibility of our leaders is something we should do away with. For part of that is why we have not been able to articulate a set of things that constitute the enemies that Bright is talking about, because that focuses us. In Europe, war focused them. In all societies that have developed very fast, something focused them. And it's leaders who have to articulate or formulate that set of things, those set of things that must focus us, for which we, the people, will be prepared to give up liberties and resources. And in Imani, we've done it. We have a rubric we call WHEAT. And we believe that if it is properly, for instance, adopted by the NDPC, and that's where we have a problem with them. We, with all due respect, we don't think there will be any real use of the 40-year plan because of part of what Bright is saying. Because you can't tell enough what is going to happen even in 20 years. And the people who will drive this economy are not in that discussion, like what the lady over there said. So indeed, put them somewhere, but come back in 20 years and you see what I'm saying is true. Because you've not focused us on something specific. So that's the first problem. Just let me round up quickly. The second assumption is the assumption that good laws have the inherent power to implement themselves. That assumption we must do away with. We must have a system that says that good laws will mean nothing except we get up and then we deal with them. The third assumption is that we citizens are weak in the face of our elected and appointed officials. If we can deal with these assumptions and find a way to go around them, maybe we'll get towards the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman Sabonsu, just a quick comment after you have heard every discussion that we have done here. Laws that work. That's your job. You make the laws.
Well, the people who make the laws are a product of what obtains in the system. That is why I shudder to think of the future of this country. The quality of materials that we are assembling in Parliament as the fulcrum of power is something that should engage our attention. Certainly the path that we are treading is not good enough. And yet we know what goes on in the election of persons to contest various seats in the various political parties. We close our eyes. We belong individually to various political parties. We know what is going on is wrong. We harvest what we sow. Let's do what is right.
Okay, Mr. Kosofa is sitting right behind him. So I was hoping that we could get some 30 seconds from him as well. When you find these people at some place, you don't let them go without saying anything. Okay, thank you very much. Now, we can hear from our guests now, starting from Bright Simmons. We end it here. Yes, your concluding remarks. Your concluding remarks.
Just two words.
Yes.
2 words, fear and trembling. Unless we completely begin to appreciate the urgency of the situation we are in, which is that one of the countries with the richest, highest, whatever adjective you want to use, human resources in Africa cannot be where we are. Having a democracy for 25 years and still being where we are to me is an embarrassment. There are countries in Africa that have a tiny amount of the democracy, the natural resource, the human resource we have, that are galloping at a faster pace. Fear and trembling. We must leave this place with the notion that there is a crisis, and what is our role in converting that crisis into opportunity.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. I have been listening and reflecting as we went back and forth. First point, obviously, no laws are self-executing. First point. So the question of agency becomes very important. All we've been saying so far, if you look at it from my perspective, is backing us into the fundamental questions about the nature of our society, its evolution, and how it manifests in the laws it passes, what it does about them. The law is just an instrument, no more than that. How you use it, who will use it, is the question. And I really honestly think what we've done today is to open the discussion for the future. We need to spend a bit more time and patience looking into ourselves as a society, not just looking for the law to rescue us or our leaders to rescue us, but looking into our society itself, its composition, its movement, and therefore better able to the medical term is diagnose our problems fundamentally and then pose solutions. The laws we enact to enforce it, that frankly is secondary. It is the basic understanding, basic diagnosis of our problems, and who acts for what. We are not all on the same side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abuchi.
Well, thank you. Just piggybacking on what Prof said, I have said it and I'll repeat it, that we must augment the sense of common responsibility. Let the average person think that the top person is bound by the law, and lets the average person believe that the top person is implementing and respecting the law. That creates a sense of moral responsibility for all. There's a sense that the law is for the small man. The small man will negotiate his way around. The cost of compliance becomes paying his way around and simply not doing it. And so let leaders feel that sense of responsibility to show themselves as being bound by the law, and I think it triggers in. It trickles in. There was a time in this country when the law held sway. Today, the law is not holding sway because people think that the people at the top have no moral responsibility to even tell them what to do because they themselves are not bound by the law. So let us increase the sense of common responsibility and avoid the race to the bottom, which is what we're experiencing today.
Thank you. Doc.
What I would say is that long-term thinking, long-term planning is the order of the day. Starting with the UN Millennium Development Goals, 15 years, it's not 5 years. They are also aware of the rapid changes in technology. But the issue is we are determining what we think we need to do, but how to do it is what changes, the technology that changes. So you continue to dream, you continue to strategize, but the fine details will be determined every 4 years. That is why I showed that over the 40 years, there will be 10 4-year medium-term plans, which will determine using the current circumstances and current technology to determine what needs to be done so that we can achieve the long-term development objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very sure that it's been very challenging to all of us in many ways in the way we understand and interpret the things that have been shared with us. So thank you very much, everybody. And let's have the vote of thanks.
Please, would call on Ms. Selom Amuji to give us a vote of thanks.
On behalf of the Noble Law Group, we would like to say a very big thank you to everyone seated here who made it a point to take time off his or her busy schedule to be here today. To Professor Akila Kwasoya, your dedication to this course is amazing and phenomenal, and we appreciate you. To our distinguished guests and panelists, Honorable Che Mensah Bonsu, Madam Anita Abebio, Dr. Isaac Mensah, Dr. Enes Kofi Abochi, Mr. Samson Ladi, Enyanini, and Mr. Bright Simmons. We'd like to say thank you for your time and intelligent input to this discussion. The CDD, Mr. Francis Chega, reps of SHRAJ, Third World Network, and many, many others, we say thank you for your presence. To our lovely audience, your presence here is evidence of your interest in Ghana's laws and policies. We encourage you to keep it up. Thank you for your time. To Benedict Selassie for conceiving and birthing this idea, keep your fire burning. Ghana needs more young and passionate ones like you. Thank you all very much. I'd also like to add that we'll be compiling some of the discussions, all of the discussions here, and we'll put it into our reports and send it to the stakeholders of our policies. And also we have a YouTube page. Noble Law Group has a YouTube page, and we'll be putting up our videos up. So if anybody is interested in listening to the discussions again, you can always get access to them. Thank you very much.